But let me tell you, the voices along the way, it's good that they did not make it in.
Honestly, there's parts I can't talk about out loud and not have trouble doing that.
Hi, Lupita.
Hi.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I had the privilege of watching the film last night, and I made it about 15 minutes in before crying.
Oh,
I'm so curious. Did you get emotional the first time that you read the script?
the first thing I did was read the book. I signed on to this thing 3 years ago, so the script was in a very different place. It's gone through a whole lot of revisions since the time I read it. So no, I did not cry. I was like looking at it, like investigating it and writing notes and all of that to do my bit in trying to, help get it to where it needed to be. But I definitely, like you, I cried through the whole film at the Toronto Film Festival this Sunday. Yeah, it was very emotional for me to see the completed project, to see how much work and love had been put into it, and to be a small part of it.
Roz has such a specific voice and
Mhm.
speech pattern, and it evolves throughout the film. I'm curious, what were some of the voices along the way that ultimately led you to what we hear in the film?
Hello, I am Rosm7134. Negative. I do not have the programming to be a mother.
Let me tell you, the voices along the way, it's good that they did not make it in. It was a workshop process. It's a great thing that animation takes so long to get made. So you have a chance to like try stuff out and they would take it away and reconsider it. And this is happening as the script is being revised. So we're finding Roz as we go. And the voice was primarily inspired, the earlier voice is primarily inspired by automated voices like Siri and Alexa and the voices you find on TikTok and Instagram.
Hello. Bonjour. Guten Tag. Hujambo. Hola. Congratulations on your purchase of a Universal Dynamics robot. I am Rosm7134. A Rosm always completes its task. Just ask.
And then as she evolves and becomes integral and a part of this island, as they influence her and she influences them, her voice kind of colors in and she gets more dimension and texture in it. And it ends up sounding a whole lot more like what I sound like.
Are those your parents?
I know predators, and those are predators.
Acknowledge return command.
What are they saying?
They want me to come with them.
Tell them you're already home.
I am already home, thank you.
You do not belong here. This is a wilderness.
And I am a wild robot.
Yeah, you can definitely hear that as it goes. Were there any words or phrases that you used to kind of get into that vocal posture of Roz?
Well, the earlier one, I used her greeting. Hello, I am Rosm7134. And that helped a lot.
That'll do it. I'm always fascinated by the movies that actors turn to for inspiration. What were you watching in preparation for and also during the making of The Wild Robot?
This is very different because this film gets made over a number of years. The preparation process is not as like linear or contained as when I'm working on a live action movie. There's a lot more just like working on instinct and also really relying on the vision of the writer director Chris Saunders. He's like a conductor, right? And we are his symphony, his vocal symphony. So it was because I didn't work with anyone else. It was really important to kind of like lean on him to really keep tabs of where the story was and where he wanted it to go.
And you've done a few voice acting projects in your career, and I'm curious, what's unique or challenging from an acting perspective about doing an animated feature? Is it more liberating or is it kind of limiting to not have the physical aspect?
Well, what I will say is that unlike live action, where you're working on, say, one or two scenes in a day, for this sort of project, you are working on the entire script every time you're in the booth. So you really have to have a dexterity and there's an athleticism to it because you have to like be ready to go on the full uh, character arc on a daily basis, when it's called for. So it's more akin to theater in that way. But then it requires a spontaneity and a sort of like lack of self-consciousness to just play in the booth. And you're always in like workshop mode because at the end of the day, they go and they pick the best take and they stitch it together. So I just say you usually have to approach it in a different way. Yeah, it's hard to like, I don't know, like I wouldn't like value one over another. It's just different challenges.
I can't not ask about your adorable cat, Yo-Yo, who I
Oh,
cherish every Instagram post of.
thank
Um,
you.
what would Yo-Yo's task for Roz be?
Yo-Yo's task for Roz. Well, I think that Yo-Yo would like Roz to control the sun. I think he would like to choose where his sunspot is at any time.
Animated movies to me are pure comfort. I think of the
Mhm.
ones that I'm constantly revisiting, like Mulan and Shrek. What are some of your favorite animated films?
Man, I can't get enough of The Lion King. And I just learned that James Earl Jones died. And so for me, that performance of his means so much to me. His voice is singular, and um, I love that movie. The fact that it was set in Africa, and I'm like, yeah, I'm African. Finally, Disney's recognizing me. And it has Swahili in it. So it meant a lot to me on many levels, and the journey that Simba goes on as well to find his power, his strength, and his role as king was very important.
Last question. You've been on a very busy press tour with A Quiet Place and now The Wild Robot. Is there something you're looking forward to watching once you have a break?
The slate of movies for this fall is really exciting. I'm very much looking forward to watching Michael Gracie's Better Man. It sounds wild and wonderful. The story of Robbie Williams as a monkey. That's what I'm looking forward to watching.
Well, there's still plenty to choose from, and I'm sure coming out of TIFF, you got a good list going. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. This film is beautiful and wonderful, and I can't wait for audiences to see it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I couldn't be more thrilled and frankly honored to chat with you today about The Wild Robot. I had the privilege of watching the film last night, and it was so beautiful. As someone who writes and directs so many emotional stories, do you get emotional during the filmmaking process?
I do. Yeah, there's parts I still can't really talk about out loud. Honestly, there's parts I can't talk about out loud and not have trouble doing that. The experience of making this film, I mean, you've got to go places emotionally as you write it. If you don't, it's not going to work. And so, yes, it is an emotional thing to write it. And but then throughout the process, we have so many hands like contribute, and at each station, it magnifies. And so something that had an effect on me, it has a greater effect as it goes through the process until ultimately Chris Bowers and his music take over. And when moments that I like was all by myself when I created them, and eventually I end up sitting with Chris Bowers in his studio, and I hear music set to this moment for the first time, it's powerful. And I can't even describe. I seriously, I'm the luckiest person in the world to be able to do this, and to have so many people contribute to a vision that I had. It all comes from a book by Peter Brown, and I do my best to do right by the book. But yeah, to have so many people enhance it and devote themselves to it and believe in it is extremely humbling.
I imagine there's a sort of alchemy in putting together the cast and the crew for any project, but especially an animated one. What was the casting process like in finding Lupita and Pedro and Kit?
Our casting director, Christy Soper, deserves all the credit in the world for gathering this cast. I write the script so that, and we have a discussion together about what types of voices and what types of characters, and I describe them as best I can. And then she will suggest actors. And we were very, very lucky that every single actor that was our very first choice said yes, and not the least of which Lupita. She had an incredible, huge job in front of her. She took this very seriously, and I cannot overstate how creative and I mean, I think she's a genius, honestly. She crafted this voice bit by bit and was extremely thoughtful, and I learned a lot just watching her take this character apart so she could understand it.
Yeah, her performance is really incredible. Everyone's is. I'm always fascinated by the movies that directors and filmmakers turn to for inspiration. What were you watching in preparation for or during the making of The Wild Robot?
There are films I've watched in the past that have had a great effect on the way I approach characters. They're not going to be maybe ones that you would expect. I always cite a black and white film. It's a Laurel and Hardy film, and I learned a lot from it. It's called The Air Raid Wardens. I saw it when I lived in Denver. Channel 2 would show it, and that's where I first saw it. And there was a thing that happens during the film. I can't really talk about it because I'll be a mess. It's just a nutty, silly comedy, but there's a moment at which something very serious, surprisingly serious happens. And I learned something from that I never forgot. I never knew at that point I was going to go into filmmaking, and it stayed with me, and I always remembered it. And it's that you can have a silly, funny character be inconsistent at one point, not inconsistent, but reveal something about themselves dimensionally. And there's a moment in this film where the character of Fink, voiced by Pedro Pascal, does exactly that. And I learned that from that movie. I will say, though, that during the making of these movies, the writing, and even while you're directing, the actual production, it's just good to go see movies. It doesn't even have to be a movie that has anything to do tonally with what you're doing. Watching a good movie, it just reminds you of what a movie is, and it helps you clear your head and focus on the right things, if that makes sense.
You had a hand in so many of the defining movies of my childhood. I was 3 when Mulan came out on VHS, and I watched it every single day for 3 years and still do. What was that movie for you growing up?
Golly. Okay, Charlie Brown Christmas. It's a made-for-TV thing, but the imperfections of it are perfect. If you fixed it, it wouldn't work. And of course, at the core of it is a great deal of sincerity. And I'm very sincere about how I feel about these things.
And almost 'tis the season to start rewatching again. As a lifelong Lilo and Stitch fan, I was ecstatic to hear that you'd be reprising your vocal role as Stitch in the upcoming live action feature. What are you most excited about in returning to that world?
I just like revisiting that character. I've never stopped doing the voice. There was a moment during after we made the film that they played a voice for me, and I didn't know why they were playing it for me. And they said, "Well, this is the guy that's going to take over." And I was like, "No one's taking over. I'm going to keep doing it." So I've always done it. So several times a year, more than several, I'll come into a recording studio and I'll do the voice for an ice show or a toy or something like that.
That's so fun. Does it take any warming up to get back into the voice, or is it pretty natural?
Not really, but I would say that something I take away from having done a voice like that is I really understand how physically taxing it can be to do these voices. And in the case of Lupita, for example, she will do upwards of a 4-hour recording session. And I understand the toll that can take on you. So it has taught me to be, it keeps me on my toes as far as keeping my direction as clear as possible so that I get them to where they need to get as quickly as possible. What people may not understand is that on a live action set, which can be physically demanding as well, you're only doing one scene, very likely, per day. But in an animated recording session, you might be doing upwards of 15 different scenes in a film. So the range of emotion that I'm asking an actor to travel through, that can be really exhausting and draining. And I want the very best of their performance. Another reason to be as clear as possible about what we're doing.
Well, it came out beautiful. I can't wait for audiences to see it. And just thank you for the time.
Oh, well, thank you.